Alrighty, what is up guys? Today I'm going to be bringing you another shed hunting video, and on today's video I'm going to be talking 10 shed hunting tips to help you find more antlers this year while you're out looking for deer antlers. I've just started hitting it hard here in the last couple weeks. I've only found a few. Actually, a lot of bucks are still holding. We got a couple of bucks in particular I'm going to be looking for their antlers, and I actually went out, saw them today, was able to photograph one of them. He's still holding, so kind of hard to find sheds when they're still on bucks' heads, but you know, I'm getting ready here in the next few weeks to a month. I think a lot of deer are going to be dropping, and hopefully I can start finding some antlers. But with that, let's talk about 10 shed hunting tips to help you find more antlers this year. The first tip I want to talk about is walking really slow. Now there's two different trains of thoughts when it comes to shed hunting. I know people that love to just walk really fast, cover as much ground as they can, you know, put on miles, you know, like people say, miles for piles, right? But I'm kind of the opposite, where I like to walk as slow as possible, because I find I'm walking really fast, I'm definitely gonna be missing antlers. So I definitely like to walk slow, really take my time, you know, really be scanning, be looking. And the slower I'm walking, usually the more antlers I'm finding. And that kind of leads right into tip number 2, which is to bring optics. I'm a big proponent of bringing binoculars out when you're shed hunting. I'm always scanning, using my binoculars. You know, a lot of times in areas where I'm shed hunting, there'll be, you know, trails that break off, and be multiple trails, and you can't cover every single one, right? So I'll walk down one a little bit, I'll throw up the binos, scan as far as I can, then go back, hit up the other one. I'll take and scan ridge sides, you know, if there's southern facing slopes, or maybe I don't want to walk 100 yards over to that slope or to that little ridge or whatever. I'll throw up the binos, scan it, and see if there's any antlers over there. And you know, actually the first shed I found this year, I spotted from about 100 yards away with my binoculars. I didn't want to walk all the way over to this area, but I thought I'd throw up the binos. I checked it out, was able to pick up tines, and then was able to go over there and find the antlers, so that's really cool. Tip number 3 is to utilize cloudy days to your advantage. I find it much more difficult to spot antlers when it's completely sunny out and, you know, my eyes are squinting. It's harder to see. The cloudier it is, the easier for me. You know, you can spot sheds easier. There's not as many hard shadows in the woods. Your eyes aren't squinting. So I really like to use cloudy days. I find it definitely easier to spot antlers. So if you're kind of picking days of the week that maybe you can get out, or maybe you can only walk one day, whether it be Saturday or Sunday, if you've got a cloudy day, I would definitely recommend walking on one of those days. Tip number 4 is going to be to pre-scout food sources. Now, food sources are really important in the wintertime when it comes to shed hunting. And I oftentimes feel like people get this kind of confused because they like the shed hunt areas where they hunt during the fall, and sometimes that'll work, but sometimes where the deer are spending their time in the winter when they're actually shedding their antlers is different from where you'll be hunting them in the fall. So I find it very important to make sure you're scouting for food sources in the winter, whether that be driving around areas or checking out different fields or whatever. Deer definitely shift where they're living from the fall to the winter. And if you're not looking in the right spot, it's going to be the Dead Sea and you won't be finding any antlers. So it's definitely really important, is you need to understand winter food sources. And this is going to lead into the next tip, which is tip number 5, which is to understand winter bedding. Now, depending on what type of areas you live, you know, this can differ vastly from hilly country to swamp country to northern to southern. So it's really about, you know, your local area. For me, I live up in the north. I'm up in Minnesota. We have a ton of snow, so deer love to bed. You know, the 2 most popular bedding areas that I'm keen in on are cedar swamps and south-facing slopes. Those 2 areas, if I can find them, I know I'm going to find deer bedding areas, and that's really important. But you know, if you live, I actually had someone comment on one of my recent YouTube videos that they live in the south and the deer like to bed on northern slopes. Which honestly I can understand if it's really hot, because then a deer are trying to get out of the sun. But where I live, deer are always trying to be in the sun because it's always super cold. So it's just understanding winter bedding areas, because like I said, deer are going to be shedding their antlers, you know, sometime between December through, you know, February, March, April. And you need to be in areas where deer are spending their time in the winter. And this is going to lead into the next tip, which is tip number 6, which is don't be afraid to cover really good areas multiple times. Now what I'm saying is you find a really good area, right? Maybe you get into that hot spot where there's a ton of deer sign, whether it be a great food source or a superb bedding area, or maybe both, and you've got in between, and you've got the great food, the great bedding. Don't be afraid, if you go in there and don't find any sheds, don't be afraid to come back again, and then again, and then again. You know, if you think there are gonna be sheds in there and you've got the sign to prove it, maybe you know there are bucks around, or you got trail camera pictures of bucks early in the year, just don't be afraid to walk an area multiple times. I do it all the time. There's multiple spots I've already covered 2, 3, 4 times this year. And I'm gonna keep walking them because I know there's antlers, and a lot of these areas, you know, it's easy to miss an antler, and don't be afraid just to go out and cover an area multiple times. And that's gonna bring us to tip number 7, which is to don't get discouraged easily. Now this tip, I think I'm gonna highlight, star, or whatever, because there are so many times where you could be out shed hunting where you might not find anything, or you might not find anything till the end of your walk, or you might go 3, 4, 5 miles plus without finding an antler. And once you start getting discouraged, you're just done for. You're not going to find anything, because once you get discouraged, you're going to be paying attention to other things. You're not going to be looking for sheds as hard. You're going to be looking at, you know, rubs or deer sign, or where you could put stands, or maybe you're just going to start daydreaming. I don't know. But once you get discouraged, you know, it's going to be much more difficult to find antlers. So you just got to realize that no matter how long you've been walking, it only takes going around the next bend to find an antler. And, you know, once you find one, you're going to be back in the game mentally. And being in the game mentally, I think, super important if you want to actually go and find a lot of antlers. And now we're going to talk tip number 8, which is a shed hunt in the rain. Now for me, this usually falls later in the spring after the snow is melted, but wherever you might be located, if you get a rainy day, I actually love to shed hunt in rain, because when it's raining out, it seems, you know, everything in the forest is kind of matted down, and these antlers just seem to pop, you know, for whatever reason. You know, one of my really good friends, Drew, who I do a lot of hunting with, I remember I was probably 15, 16 years old, and it was pouring rain outside, and he calls me up and he goes, "Hey Alex, let's go shed hunting." And I remember going, "What?" I looked out the window, and I was like, "Have you seen outside?" And he's like, "Yeah, grab 2 Ziploc bags." And I was like, "Well, what are the Ziploc bags for?" And he said, "For our phones." So I was like, all right, you know, I grabbed the Ziploc bags. He picked me up. We went out walking, got soaked to the bone, and I think we scooped like 4 or 5 antlers that day. He found them all. I didn't find any. That was back in the day before I knew how to find sheds. But the point being, that's stuck in my mind ever since. You know, if it's raining out, I love to go for a walk, because, you know, these antlers just stick out a lot better, and you can utilize, you know, I like to utilize any little advantage I can. And if that's going to help me find more sheds, then so be it. Tip number 9 is going to be to look small. Now, when I say to look small, I mean, don't be just walking around the corner expecting to see a 70-inch 5-point antler laying tines up. Yeah, does that happen every once in a while? Sure, for some people, right? And that's awesome. But what you really got to be paying attention to is looking for the little curvature of a main beam, or for a little piece of a tine, or a little, you know, part of a base of an antler. You got to be looking really small and looking for the fine, minute details. And once you start finding some sheds, and you know, when you start picking up on, oh, there's a tine, or there's a shape of a main beam, and you actually locate antlers this way, it's going to make, you know, I think of it as it'll start snowballing for you, and you'll find more and more sheds, because your eyes are going to be kind of trained to actually spot them. You know, if you're just looking for big antlers laying tines up, odds are you're going to miss a lot, and I think that's a really important tip. And the 10th and final tip is one that I really need to take to heart this year, and that's just to walk a lot. Walk as much as you can. You know, for me, I put on a lot of miles into relation to how many sheds I'm finding. And if you do the mile to shed ratio, it's not very impressive. I think this year I've put on around 30, 35 miles, and I found 3 antlers. So, you know, that's what, 1 antler every 10 miles essentially. So for me, I'm just trying to walk as much as I can. And for me to cover a lot of ground, it takes a while because I'm walking so slow when I'm out there, but it's just walk, walk, walk. That's the best tip I can give you, is just to walk a ton, because the more you're out in the woods, the more you're likely gonna find sheds, the more you're gonna learn, and then the more it'll just help you in the future. So those are the 10 tips I got for you for finding more sheds. I hope you find this video a little bit useful. If you would, I would so appreciate it if you hit that like button down below, subscribe, bell for notifications, all that stuff, you know, every YouTube video is asking you. But it really does mean a lot. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna have a lot more coming at you soon. More shed hunting stuff here in the near future. before you know it, we're gonna be into March and April, and then I'll be doing some turkey hunting too. So I appreciate you watching. I'll see you back here next time.